surprised to see all these things back there.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool.
It's very good.
Yeah.
They have everything. If you need something quickly, they can send you in 24 hours. It's very good.
Hello, good evening from Barcelona. My name is Carles Carboneras, and I will be acting as moderator of a roundtable discussion that we're going to have about the future. It's titled, Looking Ahead, What's the Future of Ornithology? This is taking place as back-to-back to a big event tomorrow, which is going to be the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Catalan Ornithological Institute, which will take place here in Barcelona tomorrow. And because we have several distinguished guests who will be joining us for that event tomorrow, we thought it would be a good idea to have an informal roundtable discussion, an informal chat about not the past, which will be the subject of tomorrow, but more about the future of ornithology. Where do we see ornithology going? So I will ask our guests to introduce themselves and say a little bit about what they do and what their profession and what they represent here today and tomorrow. Please.
Hello, I'm Stephen Baillie. I've worked at the British Trust for Ornithology since the early 1980s. I'm now retired and I'm an honorary research fellow. I'm also currently the president of EURING, the European Union for Birdringing, that coordinates birdringing activities across Europe. My work at the BTO has particularly been involved with long-term monitoring and long-term modelling of many of our large-scale data sets. I was also very heavily involved in overseeing our IT work for many years. Now we're fortunate to have a full-time professional manager looking after our IT team, but for many years this was my spare time activity. I oversaw this work from the early 1980s when we had a mini computer that I looked after and backed up in my copious free research time, and through to the development of the internet in the early 2000s, when we saw a rapid increase from having a couple of IT staff through to the 22 IT staff that we have at the BTO today. So this has been a huge growth area for us. It's been really important, and we'll probably come back to discussing the importance of those sorts of things for the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Ruud?
Yeah, my name is Ruud Foppen from the Netherlands. I work for the Dutch Center for Field Ornithology, and I'm a researcher there since 2000, and also involved in the European Bird Census Council, and lately also in the board of EURING. My main task is also working with monitoring data, and then the citizen science part of it, using all these data to do scientific work and to unravel all the things that you need to know in order to make conservation plans for birds and know everything about the wild bird species in our country in that sense, and also in Europe. So very much engaged with the large data sets and how to analyze those.
Hello everyone, my name is Gilberto Pasinelli. I'm from Switzerland and I'm the scientific director of the Swiss Ornithological Institute, currently also acting as the chairman of the Institute. So as a scientific director, I oversee the research that is being done at the Swiss Ornithological Institute. That is primarily done by many people that work in Sempach, and they carry out the field work and the analysis of different data sets and so on. In my own research, I'm interested, very broadly speaking, in ecology and behavioral ecology of birds, with a specific focus also on conservation. I always aim to study species and topics that have an impact also, potentially at least, for conservation. In my current main project, I study the relationships between resource pulses in forests, so seed masting and so on different insectivorous species in deciduous forests primarily. And I've been long working on woodpecker ecology, which I consider to be very excellent indicators of the quality of forests and also very nice ambassadors for engaging with the public.
Hello, good evening. I'm José Luis Garzón. I am from Spain. I'm from the south of Spain. I'm a member of SEO-BirdLife. I'm bird ringer. Also, I'm in the commission of ringing commission in the Migration Center. I am a bird ringer since 15 years old. I work with in a different. Because I'm not working with birds. I am a professional diver. This is my profession. But my whole life I have been searching and studying birds in my free time. So I'm here with a big table because I'm feeling small. But yes, I'm trying to defending birds in the social position of SEO-BirdLife.
Good evening. I'm Zdeněk Vermouzek from Czechia, Czech Society for Ornithology. I act as a director of the office of the society for 15 years now. And I'm not a scientist, in fact, only a little. Mainly I'm conservationist. I started my professional career as a museum zoologist and in conservation together with CSO, where we started a program against bird crime, against illegal persecution of birds. And it continues until these days. Besides the managing of the office, and the second maybe scientific part of my work is coordinating of our long-term monitoring program of common birds.
Yes, I think so the composition of the table represents several different aspects of ornithology. Not everybody has to be a scientist, and that's good. I think we have succeeded in that. We have not succeeded in having a fair representation of gender. That's obvious. And I mean, there's a reason for that. So we invited 3 female representatives, 2 of whom confirmed that they would be here today and had to pull out last minute. So that's why the table is smaller and all male. It was not meant to be like this, and we sincerely apologize for that. It's also, I mean, the composition is determined by the participants in the event tomorrow. So it is not potentially or probably not a fair representation of all the different aspects of ornithology, but we think that it will be rich to hear from all your different experiences and perspectives, your opinion on different aspects of ornithology. And even though this will focus on the future, I wanted to start as an icebreaker looking backwards on our own experience as individuals, as citizens, as watchers of change that has occurred in the natural environment. I always think of, there's one story which I think, which for me is very important. It happened 10 years before I was born, and that was the foundation of the Spanish Ornithological Society in 1954. Took place in Doñana. It happened in Doñana. And there was also international representation and a big support for the creation of this ornithological society at that moment in Spain. And they chose the cattle egret, then known as Ardeola ibis. They chose the cattle egret because at that time, 1954, Doñana was the only place in Europe where a cattle egret was a breeding species. And I checked today, and in the European Breeding Bird Atlas, there are 403 quadrats where the species is.
We've got it too.
Exactly.
Last year, yeah.
Exactly. So I think that tells a story. I think that changes the perspective as to the big changes. Some of them expected, some of them probably not expected, like you were mentioning the internet and everything related to that. So what is not not saying that it has to be the internet, but what is in your case, Stephen, what is the big change that you have seen in your lifetime?
So yeah, I think I've seen several big changes in my lifetime. First of all, simply the computerization of data, not necessarily the internet to start off with. When I started, an awful lot of stuff was still on paper. Now everything is digital. Although we're still going through a transition, we still have data sets that are not computerized, particularly data sets of original ringing data, that birds that were ringed many years ago, that have still not been entered on computer. So that basic computerization that started from the 1980s onwards through to full online systems has been a really big change. We started off computerizing ringing data, for example, through the use of volunteers. In my spare time, not my BTO time, I was one of the volunteers that started developing some software called B-Ring, which was a very basic program allowing volunteers to enter their data. We've been fortunate to have volunteers provide software for much longer, and we've only recently phased out the last volunteer-based software program that was still popular with many ringers, but now all of our ringers are at last entering their data online. So we've seen that huge change in terms of getting data computerized, and by getting data computerized, we obviously make them available for a much wider range of research and analysis than was possible when they were there on paper. And that's led to things like, EBA2 is online, Eurobird Portal, an entirely online initiative led by ICO, the Eurasian African Bird Migration Atlas that I was fortunate to be the project lead on, and the migration mapping tool, where we've done a lot of development at BTO, but where ICO and SOVON and others have been key players in bringing all of that together to provide us initially a mapping tool for the movements of these species influenced by avian flu, but now also we have this early warning system where you can go to get predictions of where avian flu is most likely to break out in the coming weeks. And we hope that as time goes by, we can refine those models under all of that further, so we get an even more useful tool for making those sorts of predictions. So all of that IT development, then the development of modeling techniques has been the second really big thing that I've seen. It started off, really, we were on very basic statistical models. I did some analyses of what was really cutting edge stuff, the Brownie program for ringing, analysing survival data. Probably none of you remember them now. They were very basic mark recapture type analysis programs. We now have very sophisticated tools that allow us to fit a wide range of models to a lot of different data types. We have Bayesian methods that allow us to fit a really wide range of quite complex models, although many of us are not really signed up to the Bayesian philosophy in which your prior should have some influence on your end results. I was fortunate to work with Bayesian statisticians in Cambridge while doing a sabbatical some years ago, but I think even they were, by that stage largely signed up to the idea that an uninformative prior was the most useful thing you could have, in which case Bayesian really becomes a toolbox that allows us to fit those sorts of models, and things like the spatiotemporal exploratory models developed by Cornell have now become, we're all very widely using those to analyze distribution data, and those are really useful for fitting a wide range of models. So that whole set of modeling techniques, and then integrated population models, another one, but really important to me and hopefully to many others, because this is where we bring in the demographic data. And I think the key piece of work we've certainly done at the BTO, which is particularly relevant to organisations that are fortunate, like ICO2 and many others, to be able to bring together all of these different data types under one roof, is actually you can use these sorts of models to start to understand the mechanisms behind changes in abundance. So obviously, ultimately, we're in a sense mainly interested in changes in abundance, but in order to predict how those might change in the future, we really need mechanistic approaches. Correlations are great, but they only take you so far. But if you want mechanistic approaches to populations, then you really need population models, and that means you need demographic data, not just observational data or numbers. So those are, and the final thing I'd like to mention very briefly in my career that I've seen huge developments has been tracking studies. We used to be entirely dependent on ring recoveries. They're still an incredibly valuable source of data for a wide range of species, but tracking data give us a huge amount of detail that we couldn't get from ringing data. So combining ringing data and tracking data allows us to get a much more comprehensive picture of how birds are moving, and those sorts of approaches can only develop further in the future. I think there's still quite a long way to go. There's still quite big limits to how we can track small birds in particular, governed by the fact they're small, so the devices you can put on them are small, and the precision you can get is not very great, but there's still lots of opportunities for technological development there.
Good, thank you very much. Now, I'm interested from your perspective.
Yeah, if I look back 50 years, and I can look back 50 years, 50 years ago I was a young bird watcher. And I joined the first Atlas project in the Netherlands. And from that perspective, it's really incredible what we have gone through in time. There were a few coordinators at that time within our institute. That was it. There were no scientists. They might have had a previous science background, but their job was coordinating volunteers. The term citizen science didn't exist, certainly not the science part of it. It was just volunteers, stimulating volunteers, coordinating volunteers, and making a nice book with the distribution of birds. And that was amazing. We could map birds. Yeah, that was already an accomplishment, and I was happy to join it as a volunteer. Many years later, I joined the institution, and then I was one of the first scientists really joining the club. And yeah, what is astonishing is that we became from a volunteer group into a really a small science and enterprise. So, and what I noticed, I was also for many years active as a professional ornithologist. We were not taken, or Solvon, or all kinds of organizations were not taken serious by scientists, by the scientific world. Not at all. It was nice, but come on, that was not science. So what I witness now, if I look at our simple institute in the Netherlands, quite small, but I see it in many countries, we have top scientists working for us, doing work, not only collecting data. Of course, everybody wants to have their own projects and do nice things in the field. It's very important to have also the connection with the field and the ecology. But we do things with these data, with these volunteer data. It's not only putting dots on the map. It's much, much, much more. And we are only in the beginning. It's my idea and my strong belief. We are only in the beginning of making better use of these data in a scientific way. Stephen was already expressing what kind of technological approaches and developments there have been. We can make use of those using all of these data, also improving the value of those data by, for instance, training the volunteers and having good science and good monitoring projects. I think it's amazing if you look at, it's only, okay, it's 50 years, but the last 25 years has been, it's going on and on and on, also with our organization. And I think, meanwhile, I can say that we are being taken serious by scientific world. And scientists want to work with us and our data. And that's good because it increases the value of what we produce. And it also makes people aware of what is happening outside with our birds. Because, yes, it was already expressed with the cattle egret, the bird world is as dynamic as the other outside world. It's hugely dynamic, and we need to understand what is happening. And I think citizen science, and now we can call it citizen science, is really helping us and has gone through an incredible development. And that's, for me, what is the most important.
Thanks. Both of you have given a very positive view so far. Let's see if we can keep the momentum.
Yeah, all right. I'll try give my best. I have, of course, fully agree with what my colleagues already mentioned. I think the increase in knowledge that we have about birds today is largely coming from the better models that we can apply, more data that is available, which is based on an increase in the way we do our bird monitorings. So we have many more really structured, systematic monitorings in place in many countries across the world, which then in the end are the basis for the population models or the distribution models that we use to produce atlases or whatever. So I think this increase in how we do the monitoring on the one hand and how we analyze the monitoring data, that's really, for me, one of the biggest changes over the past 50 years, although I haven't really contributed very much to that field, I have to say. The second point, I think, which for me is quite different than, let's say, 30 years ago, maybe 50 years. I was a little bit younger. I didn't oversee the whole subject, but nowadays I have the impression that we have a much bigger knowledge on many different aspects of bird biology. As an example, when you look back in the 70s, people talked about mating systems and so on. And then at that time, it was still, accepted in general that most birds are monogamous. And we nowadays know, thanks to the molecular revolution, that extra pair parentage is widespread in many bird species. So this is just one example how scientific approaches have helped us to increase the knowledge about the biology of birds. Stephen already mentioned the technological advances in tracking. By having all these small loggers and transmitters and so on available nowadays, we know much more about how birds move around in the world, be them migrants that go to Africa. We know more about where they go, when they go, how fast they go, how far they go. So this is, in the last, I would say, 20 years, we have seen a really tremendous increase in knowledge about bird migration. And also, if we are not focusing on bird migration, we have really increased our knowledge about dispersal ecology, for example. So we know much more about how birds move around in the landscapes, why do they go, and again, how far do they go, and so on. I think all these increases in knowledge based on technology on the one hand, but also based on very good research is really surprising and amazing. I have to add a negative point, maybe. I mean, just to make something else for a change. For me, what's also really amazing, how strongly farmland birds, for example, have decreased. I mean, I haven't really experienced the situation when farmland birds were really much more abundant, but I started to become an ornithological student at a time when I still could observe tree pipits, for example, in the lowlands in Switzerland. Nowadays, they are gone. There are lots of other species that have really strongly declined in Switzerland, in the farmland areas, as well as in other parts of Europe. And on the other hand, you have very nice examples of increases. To finish maybe with a positive story, you mentioned the cattle egret. For me, it's the species that has had a really surprising change in abundance is the middle-spotted woodpecker, which is one of the species I know quite well. And when I studied that species in the 90s, it was a declining species all over the world, meaning in Europe. And nowadays, it's more or less increasing everywhere. So that's really amazing. And also that shows us that there is hope, even for species that are strongly declining. Something happens, which we often don't fully understand, but there is hope that things can change to get better.
Good, thank you.
Well, I cannot look back 50 years because I am 39 years old. But I think in the field of ornithology have changed greatly over the past 50 years. One of the biggest changes is the amount of knowledge we have now. Thanks, everybody talk about the technology, better technology, long monitoring trends and citizen science. Now we understand much more about bird migrations, population trends, or habitat needs. You know? But another important change is the way of society think about birds. Because today birds are not only a subject of scientific study. Birds today are a symbol of environmental health. So I think society is something very important, the thing that society think about birds. I think in the last 50 years that have changed in the good way. But talking about distributions and abundance of species also have changed. He talked many in agriculture species have declined. So unfortunately, many others have declined. For example, house sparrows. House sparrows in the 50 years ago was one of the most common birds in all our cities. But in 1998, SEO-BirdLife begins a census program. The name is SACRE. SACRE is the name of the census program of resident bird, okay?
Common bird monitoring.
Common bird monitoring, yes. So after almost 30 years, the program showed us that we lost around 30 millions of sparrows in Spain. Is around 20% of the whole population of sparrows in our country. So yes, some species have declined. Yes, ornithology has changed a lot because now we have an incredible technology and vast knowledge, of course, but even like this, we have a big challenge in the conservation of our ecosystem and birds.
Okay, I'm now not sure if I should be positive or negative because everybody tried to be positive here, and that was also my original plan. But what wasn't mentioned, at least partly, is the strong decline in general bird populations over the years, over the 50 years or more, which is something which we should not overlook, not only in our discussion, but generally in our approaches. We then can be positive about the knowledge. We then can be positive about how we understand the circumstances, the mechanisms which influence the bird populations, which cause the declines, what should be done to reverse it. This is fantastic, everything. But still we have the major decline of bird populations around the world, in Europe, in our countries, and it is something which isn't positive in the end. But maybe I can end in a positive way with my original note. A look at ornithology from a Central European perspective. at least in our countries, in our region, the ornithology is much more inclusive than in the 50 years ago, when I started with ornithology in 80s. It is not 50 years, okay, but still there were very few women among ornithologists, with some exemptions, but there were only exemptions. Now it is 50 by 50 in the science, in the citizen science, in the office, among conservationists, and I regard it as a fantastic and very important thing, because it shows that birds, that the conservation, that the science is developing into a really societal thing, that it is perceived by the wide society. It is not a single group, it's broad. We can illustrate it on our citizen science programs, which are rising. As the birds are declining, the number of people who care for them is rising. Yeah. And then they include scientists, they include workers, they include children, they include all genders, they include elder peoples. That is promising.
Everything but this table.
Everything but this table.
Yeah, no, it's important what you said, because these declines that you were mentioning, they tend to be bigger in countries which have the best science. So the UK, the Netherlands tend to have the biggest declines, and it's difficult to understand why. If you know better, why isn't that applied by society? But we will debate. Yeah. We will debate about that. It's maybe with a beer afterwards. No, I wanted to move on to the future. So looking ahead, as the title of this discussion is, what do you see in terms of species/knowledge, species or knowledge? How do you see the next, say, 50 years? Where do you think we are going, or where do you think we can go in terms of focusing on species, which includes knowledge? Stephen, if you'd like to start.
So I think we can move to a situation where, in fact, we already have quite a good idea of the trends and abundances of most species. But I think we can move to a situation where, for a much higher proportion of those species, we have some understanding of the mechanisms involved in population change. I think if you look now, you'll still find there are quite a lot of species where, although we know, oh, it's terrible, that one's declined, or this one's just about stable now, but it has declined in the past, or whatever, we still don't always really know what's caused that decline. So I think having a better, and I think understanding those causes of change very often requires us to have demographic data as well as just abundance data. And I think perhaps that's something I'd like to see a bit more emphasis on in the future. We're generally now very good at collecting abundance data. Those abundance data are really important. They underpin very much of what we do, and I'd want to see their development continued, but I think we do also need more demographic information if we're going to understand mechanisms involved in change. And if you look at the number of countries, for example, that have large-scale nest recording schemes, you'll still find that's quite small. There are obviously various ways you can approach these things. You can approach it through more intensive professional studies, but I think we've certainly found in the UK that if you want to cover a really wide range of species, in addition to having some key focused professional studies, you do need to have large-scale demographic monitoring, and that generally means nest recording, it means standardized bird ringing, it means often some general bird ringing that we can also generate very valuable survival information through ring recovery data, if we have sufficient numbers of birds being ringed. So there's a variety of mechanisms. In the future, we could potentially use large-scale tracking studies. At the moment, we don't generally do large-scale tracking studies. We may do some moderately large ones for very well-funded professional pieces of work, but we generally look at tracking studies as something we use to look at specific issues of migration routes or whatever with. But there's scope to do more in those areas. So I hope that gives some indications of some of the areas we might use to tackle those sorts of issues.
Good, thanks. Ruud, what's your view?
I agree that better data on demography of birds will bring us further in understanding what is happening. But I fear that we are challenging the citizen science a bit in this, because we tried for years, and BTO of course also, to, for instance, enlarge our constant effort site programs and to have more nest records of all kinds of breeding birds, but it's going slowly, and we are really asking a lot from volunteers. Of course, we shouldn't stop with that, but I think there is a limit to what we can ask to the general public in collecting the data. There might be help from the technological part in getting data on demography by smart solutions, but there is I think sometimes I have the question whether we over-ask our volunteers with these things. But okay, I think that's my what I wanted to address is that we can do still more with our data, and in the sense that I think the large-scale observation data are being able to give us what we could call pseudo cause-effect relationships. We can do more with the data. You don't need, it's impossible to do experiments to prove causal relationships for all kinds of causes that we think are important. I've seen now, because of the technological development in statistics, that we are able to get these important relationships between threats and pressures and the fate of the bird populations by just making clever use of all these data, these big data sets. And one of the ways to do it is to use data at a large scale and large time frame, like in our European data, to make a kind of comparative ecology. Make comparisons between regions and countries within Europe helps us to understand and to unravel the causal factors that are important. I think we still have a way to go, a long way to go before we can really address this, because although we know these data sets, every country has beautiful data sets. We collect them in the European Bird Portal, and we collect them in the European breeding bird censuses. But still, I see a huge opportunity to make better use of these data. So, and we have the opportunity now because these data are now in large data sets. So, but we must work also on clever analysis, making the best of these data. I think there's a huge potential there. So that's my main topic: make better use of the citizenized data. And the other thing is that we shouldn't underestimate the value of giving more possibilities for volunteers to improve their knowledge. For instance, and there is a need for it, and there is a wish for it from the volunteers. We have these webinars in explaining things to volunteers, how to count and how to recognize and they are, we easily can get 300, 400 people for a small topic. So people want to learn about birds, and with the online possibilities, we can give courses to people. They don't have to come to a small room in the evening where we can, we can just make a webinar, which they also can look back at their own time, which explains things to them. And I think that's very helpful in, in improving the knowledge of the volunteers. That's beneficial for us. We get better data, but it's very beneficial for them because they want to know about birds, and we can give them the knowledge. I think that's something that with all of us in citizen science ornithology should really be aware of, that there is a huge potential to improve or to give people knowledge, what they want in birding and recognizing birds and counting birds. So.
Thanks for your views, both of you. We are moving very much onto the social aspect, which is fine. It was going to be the third question, but that's absolutely fine. I will come back and ask both of you and then everybody else. What is your prediction in terms of what is going to be the next Català and what is going to be the next great auk? So, what groups of species, what habitat-related species, groups, etc., what do you think is going to do well and what do you think is going to do badly in the future? But that's absolutely fine. We will come back to that. Gilberto, your view on, well, either way. Either way. If you want to continue with knowledge, and that's absolutely fine, or if you want to move on to species, it's also absolutely fine.
Maybe just to add about the knowledge, I think we are all facing a really big challenge when we look at the big amount of data that are being produced by whatever tool you use outside in the field. You have these acoustic loggers that work more or less 24 hours for seven days a week. That's a massive amount of data that comes in, and if we want to use that cleverly, we really have to think hard about how to use it cleverly and what to do with all the data that comes in. I think that's a big challenge on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's also a big an important possibility to inform our work as a scientist, or also when you want to do more conservation work. I think there is lots of things that you can do with these data, but you have to know how to do it. Same thing applies to genomics, where we have an increasing load of data, so to speak, and we have to really think hard how we can tackle these things. In terms of maybe more changes related to the environment, I think what we will continue to see is the impact of climate change that will continue to be more serious, I guess. Even we will probably see more species retreating towards northeast that are now perhaps somewhere in Central Europe. On the other hand, you will have more species coming from the south, from southwest, that move into Central Europe. So there will be a shift in the communities of the species compositions. More specifically, I continue to expect declines in formal bird species. I don't think that, irrespective of climate change, there will be too much hope if things in the politics don't change in relation to how we manage our land. On the other hand, there are also other developments that I think we need to think about and take care of. For example, in forests, we have a change of the tree species composition being brought about by climate change again. And what we have now as nice and beautiful forests with interesting bird species might not be the case in 50 years, because things will have changed by then. So these are the challenges that we are facing, and yeah, I think we are here, and we have to use as much of the technology that is available for us to reach out also to people, to get to their hearts in the end. We have to connect better to people so that they create also more pressure on the politicians so that things change in relation to a more biodiversity-friendly landscape. I think that's really very important, and it's not only a topic of ornithology, I think.
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, continue with the social perception of ornithology. I think it continues to improve because more people are becoming interested in birds, and not only as a hobby, but as a way to understand the health of our environment. Citizen science projects and social media make bird watching more accessible for people and help the society to see ornithology as something useful and exciting. But I think we need to increase the effort not only in bird research, so in environmental education. I think our generation, okay, because I don't know if I'm going to be alive in 50 years, but I have a niece. She's 8 years old, and the way she think now about birds and conservation maybe will be the key for the conservation of the birds in 50 years. So I think association like I represent, we are making a big effort for to bring the birds and natures to the society, because the way that the society think is also is going to be the future, because the police, the politics way that actually they are managing our ecosystem with the politics. So if the society that we have think that birds and nature are very important, they are going to vote, they are going to push politicians that provoke that change in a good way for our ecosystem and birds. So I think, of course, we need to still doing the research of birds, and we need to use our technology for increase the knowledge, because this is very important. But the social perception of ornithology, I think, is the big key here for the conservation in the future, unless this is the way I think.
We will, yeah, it's difficult to predict.
Of course,
if we are winning or
predict.
losing. It's very, very,
Yes.
very difficult. We can debate about that. Yes, Zdeněk, what's your view?
It's hard to be the last in the line and to
sorry.
say something clever. Still, I try.
Maybe we can rotate later.
Regarding the distribution of birds and groups of birds, we mentioned the shift northwards of bird communities and eastwards. I can see another type of systematic shift, which is synanthropization. As bird species became more and more able to live close to people, live in cities. So that's the trend, but it's very hard to say which species will be the next one, because it's sometimes very surprising with species which were regarded shame and forest dwellers shift their behavior in few generations very quickly, and can inhabit many cities. That's one thing. The other thing is the rise in non-native species, and the question which we can ask is what is non-native, and when the species which originally are non-native became to be
Impressive.
part of the communities, became to be working in the communities, and then how to look at it. Let's talk about, or we can talk about the common pheasant. Is it European species or not? It is here for centuries, not native.
Not native.
Hard to say. And this trend will be more prominent with the change of climate and with the quick development of human activities. And the last point is the migration. The change in migratory behavior in species, because we know that the migratory species are declining as a group. They face dangers. They face problems on the migratory roads, on the wintering places. So the conservation usually is much harder than conservation of a stable population yeah. So, and we can see some changes. Blackcaps from Central Europe can change the migratory routes and winter in Great Britain. Some storks are wintering in Central Europe in more and more numbers. Some other species like starlings, like skylarks, many others are wintering in Central Europe as well. What does it mean? How this will influence again the whole communities? That's are the interesting questions again for the science for the future, for the next 50 years.
Let's ask the table. Who wants to make a prediction of species that will do well or species that will do badly? Usually, groups of species is probably more relevant.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's enormously dynamic, the world. If 50 years ago we would be asked this question, we probably would all fail in our yeah, for sure, in our predictions. But if I don't look ahead 50 years, but at least for the next couple of decades, you can for surely say and predict safely that the farmland birds will do worse than ever. The decline is ongoing with our main topic species, the meadow birds in the Netherlands. One of the species or biodiversity items that has the most attention also from policy. We put millions and millions and millions of euros in it already for 50 years. Since 75, we are busy with the black-tailed godwit, still going down. My prediction is we're not going to save the black-tailed godwit in our, let's say, regular farmland areas, only in reserves. That's my prediction. It's also going with lapwing, the same way, skylark. We need, unfortunately, I think, reserves, nature reserves for farmland birds. Otherwise, they won't hold in the Netherlands. That's my prediction, and I see it also in the daily affairs in conservation of these species. Unfortunately, has everything to do with economy and farmland practice. We cannot change that.
Can I ask? So you suggest, and this is a suggestion that comes out regularly in Europe, of making these reserves for farmland birds. But those areas, those sites should be farmed.
Yeah.
So those are sites that need to be farmed. And how are they going to be farmed, is my question.
Yeah, with a new type of farmers that want to include nature inclusive farming. Yes. And we have to compensate the farmers, or otherwise they are not able to do it, or they don't want to. I don't know. Yeah. It's policy. It's the general policy is not focusing on, let's say, regular farming with nature inclusion. It's about, okay, we are going to compensate you if you also take care of biodiversity values in your farmland. Yeah, that's the only way I see out of it at the moment. If we get a huge transition on the European level of farming practices, yes, then you might expect positive benefits for biodiversity. But I don't see this huge transition, general transition of farmland practices yet. It might be there in the future, but for the time being, for the next couple of decades, we have to do with holding of species in, yeah, this kind of structures. And okay, that's the negative point. And we have a lot of farmland in the Netherlands, but fortunately, if I'm now more or less wrapping up also 75 years of bird counts and bird trends in the Netherlands. And what I can see is we have more species than ever in the Netherlands. Yes, We have higher numbers than ever in the Netherlands. Yes, yes. And that has all to do with urban areas, 3D urban areas, 3D forest areas where there's lots of birds, generalists, which compensate for, let's say, the open landscape declines. All the birds in the open landscapes, almost all the birds in open landscapes, farmland, heathlands, moors, they are going down. But it's being compensated by the increase in urban areas where there's lots of birds. The birds are getting used to people. People are not shooting them anymore or killing them. So there's lots of birds in our urban areas, most urban areas, and there is more forest than ever in the Netherlands, or not than ever, but than the last 75 or 100 years, which there are also high densities of birds. Not maybe the species that are very attractive, like the robins, but they are there. So if you simple add up the numbers, you get this kind of strange thing that you cannot prove that birds have, you know, in general, declined. Although the typical species of open landscapes are just fading away. The wheat ear is going to be extinct in a couple of years in the Netherlands. So, and there's many, many, many examples.
A different view, a different perspective from the mountain, sort of a mountain-dominated country? Or is it the same?
No, a complementary view, I would say. I think in addition to the farmland problems that Ruud already mentioned, which can, to some extent, if you think of these reserves that you mentioned, be mitigated by having a management that is really low intensity management. There's excellent examples across Europe where this not theoretically, it really works empirically also. The question is, can you do that on a large enough spatial scale so that both the farmers and the birds benefit, and the insects and so on. I mean, we haven't talked about insects, which are the basis for birds, and we have to really think how we can bring the insect diversity back to a stage that was maybe 20, 30 years before. But adding something from a mountainous country, thank you, Carles, I think really the cold adapted species are the ones that will be having more and more trouble. So because their habitat is shrinking, the higher up they move. We have seen these changes in altitude in various bird species in Switzerland, and the higher up they move, the lower is the percentage of area that is available to them as habitat. And at some point there will be no habitat left anymore if they cannot adapt evolutionarily to some extent. I think that's a big group that is facing crisis, I guess. And in addition to that, I would also mention something in the lowlands, like the marshland birds, for example. If we think of climate change with all the hotter and drier summers, that has consequences for the habitats where these birds live. And I'm not sure what exactly the perspective is for these species. On the other hand, we have increasing heavy rainfall and so on. But the question is one thing making up for the other, or are we really facing big problems? I mean, they have been in trouble for a long time, these marshland bird species, but those species and populations that remain, can they survive the next 50 years? I'm not so sure, actually.
Good, thanks. We need to move on because there are some questions from the audience online, I hear. And so I wanted to touch on the last, I mean, we've touched a little bit on conservation, but it was going to be my proposal for the last topic in terms of what is the role, looking ahead, what role will there be for ornithology in conservation? Am I expressing myself? So how do you see the role of the ornithological world, scientists, organizations, so volunteers contributing to citizen science, etc., etc. How do you see that transforming into or translating into something that will actually make all those changes that we have identified as being needed? Anybody wants to?
Well, I think, I believe ornithological knowledge will become even more important for conservation. I think so. As we face climate change, on habitat loss and declining population, understanding bird behavior, migration, and ecology will help us to make better decisions if something happens. I think citizen science and new technology will also play a big role in that. With more people collecting information as we talk with better tools for track birds, we will detect the problem earlier and for react faster. It's not easy, but I think a stronger scientific knowledge, it means a stronger protection. Of course, we talk about the perception of ornithology, about whether we need environmental education for sure, but we need to still study our birds for sure.
But the question, which I make to everybody around the table, is: are we winning, or do we feel that we are winning, or are we losing? And do we have the tools to translate that?
I think we're losing. If you look at all the discussions we've just had about declining species, it's clear that there's a lot more decline than in general. I think we are doing very well on scarce species which live mainly on nature reserves. In the UK and in many other parts of Europe, we have strong networks of nature reserves. Those reserves are generally well managed, relatively well resourced. Some of that's government effort, certainly in the UK and in quite a few other countries. Many of that is voluntary effort, and that there is a big and complex interaction there between interest in birds, knowledge of birds, enthusiasm about birds, people then supporting bird conservation organisations, and I think in many cases also other wildlife conservation organisations in the voluntary sector. Certainly in the UK, the voluntary sector in conservation is incredibly important. In some other countries, it doesn't have the resources, I know, that our UK bodies are fortunate to have. Government is still vital. You can't do many of these things without government, but the voluntary sector can play, I think, a really important part in showing what can be done in terms of what we can achieve through nature reserves and through management. But in terms of the wider countryside, we're definitely losing at the moment. And the reason for that, as we've heard, is that there are many other pressures from farmers, agriculture, industry, and so on. And the conservation sector, even in a country like the UK, we have a very strong support for our conservation sector, but even so, it's difficult for that to win out against, say, intensive farming pressures.
Does everybody think that we're losing? Or?
Well, I believe in science-based conservation, definitely, but if I see, I get very cynical if I look back at the meadowbird case, and we know already for 20, 30, 40 years what to do in order to conserve meadowbirds, but it doesn't happen. So, yeah, that makes me wonder, what is that the right strategy, having knowledge, having scientific knowledge to conserve, or couldn't we better make use of ornithology by, indeed, what also is expressed here, by using our volunteers as ambassadors for nature, and to make people aware of how beautiful birds are and nature is and biodiversity is, and by that way, more or less reach the goal of conservation. About huge groups of people that love nature. And that's something completely else than using the data to make science-based conservation.
But do you think, to you and others, do you think we will be better at doing this in the future? Or we will be the same as we are now, and therefore continuing to lose?
You mean with engaging people?
Yes.
I think we are on the way of engaging more and more and more people. If I look at all the low entry level projects that we launch, they are hugely successful. The urban bird counts and so people love birds and more. When I started, I was a very strange figure. I was male. I wasn't old, okay, but look now, it was expressed already. The gender issue is not so important anymore. It used to be. So yes, we reach reach out to more and more people, which is very, I think, very positive.
I don't see our volunteer-based efforts in terms of surveys and other work as being something which is stopping the wider conservation effort. Certainly in the UK, there are far more people involved in membership of conservation organisations, in volunteer work parties, in campaigning, in all sorts of other activities than are involved in the sorts of detailed bird survey type work we've been talking about today. Our volunteer input to volunteer surveys is fantastic. They're doing a really great job, but we are not, I think, significantly detracting from the wider conservation effort. That is still there, but unfortunately, even that much wider conservation effort, even RSPB with 1 million members, isn't big enough to, at the moment, to make the impacts that we would like to make on, say, government policy to achieve wider level change.
To conclude, maybe with something clever from Central Europe.
I'm not sure. I just would like to mention one new aspect or new tool which we have and which we don't use enough in the conservation work or science conservation. I expect in the coming years more interdisciplinary studies between ornithology, sociology, psychology maybe, studies which described in detail how birds and nature in general, but we're talking about birds, influence the mental health of people, how influence our well-being. There are such studies here, we know about them, but we cannot use them in the conservation work. Once we have more knowledge, and once we are able to name and describe how these mechanisms work, it means how important birds are for people generally. We then can even evaluate this. It's called ecological services, and use really this tool and this approach to convince people or to explain to the public why it is important to conserve birds. That it is because of us, not because of them.
It may be related to this, what we talked about, widening the base, and because obviously, our side, I include myself here, we know about our work, so we need other professionals, other people, other recruits into the world of ornithology to do that other part, which is also important. Yes.
I know you said it's the last statement, and I would just like to add that it's for me it's not either or, but it's both. So we have to continue working on the knowledge. We have to present evidence-based solutions, because if the time comes that things change in the political landscape, let's say, then we have to be ready and provide the details. And on the other hand, we have to really get more at the heart of the people. As I said it before, we really have to show them how fascinating the birds are as representatives of nature in general. And if we manage to do that, if we increase this fascination for birds and for the living world in general, then I think there is an increasing pressure on various groups that are important in taking decisions, without naming specific groups here now.
Yeah, good, thanks. I think we have some questions from the live audience.
Can I sit here?
Oh, sure, yes, absolutely. Yes.
What is it? So there are several questions from the audience. Two of them has been answered just now. So maybe the first one is for you, maybe. Do you think that as far as technology keeps improving and we got more accurate ways to track bird population, bird movements, it might happen that bird ringing won't have the prevalence that it has today? So it's about the role of bird ringing, where all the technology is improving to.
I think we will see a continuing involvement in evolution, of the use of these different technologies. So I wouldn't necessarily expect bird ringing to look exactly the same as it does today in 50 years' time. But there are many things that we do with bird ringing through various systematic studies. Constant effort sites is an example where we use standardized bird ringing to obtain demographic data. I think it's very likely we're going to need to continue to use those sorts of standardized approaches to gain demographic data. I don't think that's going to just be replaced by tracking methods. We might well start to see more use of tracking methods through volunteer-based surveys. As tracking methods become smaller, easier to apply, we can potentially apply them more widely. These are tracking methods have and still are to a large extent an area mainly worked in by professionals, because large amounts of money are needed to buy the tracking devices. Depending on the issues, a particular training may be needed, but often it wouldn't be difficult to train volunteers to fit more tracking devices. The main limitation is often the resources for the programs. So I think we'll see things evolve, but I don't think there's going to be a sudden change from one type to the other. I think we'll still need large-scale sampling. One thing we perhaps haven't mentioned very briefly, I can see things like photography and acoustic methods as adding new things to the mix. For example, there are quite a lot of birds that you could probably age if you had a really good photograph of them. And if we had that stuff on a large scale, just think what you could do.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions about artificial intelligence in a way of how do you think AI is going to change the way citizen science is collecting data? I don't know. It's not a simple question, but
well,
it's up to you to...
One thing you also mentioned is acoustic devices that to identify the species from an acoustic signal.
Yeah.
I think AI will be very helpful in the future. Already now, and in the future also to improve the identification tools, and that might give us opportunities.
I think, just come in with a warning. I think that's absolutely right. Sort of applications of that sort with AI are really valuable, probably going to be quite robust. I think as we see it at the moment, at least, AI is potentially enormously dangerous. It will not always give us the right answers. And at the moment, we don't really know when it is giving us the right answers and when it isn't. So let's be honest, AI has a huge potential, but it also comes with some very serious risks. And I think this is a problem that goes well beyond the conservation community, but we really need to take those things on board.
The other related question is if we are going to hire or to include AI engineers to make the most of the data we already have. Faces.
It's actually something we already are doing at the Swiss
Yeah.
Ornithological Institute. We have increasingly, not more, I mean, we have few people that really are software engineers or programmers that really, they're not ornithologists anymore. They are becoming ornithologists now because they work now at the Swiss Ornithological Institute. But to really get most out of these data, you really have to have the people that know how to deal, how to massage the data and so on.
Thank you. And maybe the last one is what's the difference, what difference do you see in how to raise awareness about birds and conservation now compared to 20 or 50 years ago?
The internet is probably the first.
The first.
Very
Reaching out
simple.
is easier.
There are huge potential to communicate the wonder of birds, the excitement of birds through the internet. We all use it in all sorts of ways, through YouTube channels, through websites, through through various social media outlets. And I think that work needs to continue and to be developed. yeah, it is very useful.
I think it's much easier to learn learn ornithology now that when we were young.
Sure,
For sure.
I was mentioning the webinars.
Yeah,
It's so easy nowadays to get all the information that.
And photography has been mentioned as well.
Yes.
But we just have to look at these books here in the back. How many books do you think that have been published 50 years ago?
Wow.
Not so many.
Well, we had the Peterson and Singer and
the information we have today is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's not only the information, it's the facility that we have for connect people with this information. So I think being a little more positive that we have the tools to get to the people, to increase the love of nature and birds, and trying to conserve our ecosystem and birds with this mind of the people who love birds. And
we maybe have better tools than before.
Another just slight word of warning. That we're good at communicating, we've got lots of tools, that's great, we need to do it. But when it comes to people understanding evidence, you can only understand evidence by drilling into the detail and really understanding it. A lot of that's out there, but if you don't understand what a statistical argument is, you don't understand how a mathematical model works, you cannot understand the evidence properly. So, I mean, it's still great to have a look at the stuff, to know what people are saying about it, but don't pretend you can understand something. I think one of the things we need to do more to educate people, and this isn't just about ornithology, this is very general, we need to do more to educate people about how to look at the evidence, how to, know when they can believe something, who they should ask if they want to challenge it or they're doubtful about it. And I think there's a whole load of questions in there. It's another discussion topic on its own at least, but we really need to be aware of those issues.
In the same time, we shouldn't undervalue the personal evidence. That maybe in the time of internet, when everything is on internet, our lives is much more and more digital. In fact, it is important to have the real experience, something which the birds really can offer. When I walked the street today in the afternoon to this meeting, I heard singing rock thrush, blue rock thrush from the top of the buildings here in Barcelona. It is something fantastic. It is something which cannot be experienced in the internet. I must be in the place, I must hear it, and that's the important feeling. That is something, because the question was about the rising awareness, the original question. So that is something which we need to use when talking about rising awareness, to allow people to live their own experience with birds in nature in the real world. And maybe internet helps us to show the contrast.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. We are done with the online questions, but there's also a question from the audience here.
Right.
Mikel, raise the voice, please, because
Okay. Future, probably there will be more technology, more IA, or even DNA samples, environmental DNA, etc., which do you think that this more technological sophistication can brought a sort of disconnection with this personal experience, the citizens' science, etc., that could be more difficult for the ordinary people to do DNA samples, for instance, or things like that. Is there something that could be disconnecting the science to the society, also in the framework of the context that today science is more and more getting difficult to be perceived as the truth. People are more and more politicians are saying, okay, science is, well, but we have another truth. So in this context, what do you think that in future the ornithology could be, like you say, still more experience and nice, also nice activity for anyone, even for the scientists, or maybe it's something that is going to be very, very specialized, only for even computer people, and that's all. What do you think about this in future? Trying to predict 30 or 40 years ago from now, please.
I personally think that human observation will continue to be incredibly important. And so I don't see that changing enormously. I think there are some interesting but challenging technologies coming into play now, most notably the use of things like acoustic recording. And I think we are already exploring, for example, the use of acoustic recorders that we can deploy to monitor remote breeding bird survey sites in Scotland, which simply don't get visited enough because we don't have enough volunteers in remote areas of Scotland. It's not surprising. There are not that many people that live there. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful place, but it does have a limited population size. So I think I can see we could well see very widespread use of acoustic recorders. An example here is bats, where colleagues at the BTO are doing a lot of work now on bats based on acoustic recording. This is producing some really valuable conservation-related data on bat distributions and abundances. But if you're somebody who goes out and does this bat recording, you go and get a bat recorder, you may not even know anything about bats. You go and hang it up wherever it needs to be put. You collect it a few days later, get the tape, hand it in or whatever, and you've made your contribution as a volunteer. That was really valuable. The data can then be automatically analysed and we can get the results. But now that's the only way we can do bats. And so that's really useful. But you could see the potential for that to be expanded in the bird line, and we get more and more of it being done automatically. And then you perhaps start to risk increasing that distance between volunteers who actually have that deeper knowledge of the birds. So I think while we can at least maintaining a good part of our survey programmes where we have that deeper knowledge and we need those volunteers to really know the bird calls and songs is really valuable.
I just would like to add here to the concern that using all these new technologies leads to an increasing separation between, let's say, citizen scientists and scientists. In my opinion, it's probably rather the opposite.
Yeah,
because it's an enrichment. We have different people, they have different needs. Some want to take photographies, they go out with a nice camera, carefully done, it's a perfect thing. Or you make acoustic recordings. I'm a recordist. Acoustic recordings. I'm not a photographer. So if I wasn't a scientist and I would want to contribute something to science, I would be very happy to go out and make recordings of bird songs. I think it's more complementary, more inclusive if you have additional techniques that can be applied by different people. And in the end, I think from a scientist's perspective, it's probably increasingly more important to be able to support also people that generate lots of data. I mean, passive acoustic monitoring generates huge amounts of data. We have to know what to do with them. And the same thing is if you are going more into the eDNA realm that you mentioned briefly, then you also have to collaborate with scientists. But that again can be enriching for both sides because it promotes the acceptance of both sides, I think. I see this as a chance, as an opportunity, rather than a threat.
It's a new set of eyes and ears that you have my garden wouldn't have such a long list if I wouldn't have had an acoustic device picking up the owls at night. I've never heard or seen a barn owl or heard it myself, but my acoustic device has it, and I can listen to it and it's just, yeah, I've got a barn owl in the garden.
That doesn't count, you know.
It doesn't count. It's a second.
For me, it counts. I have it on the list.
This is cheating.
No, not cheat at all. No, it's there. It's there. I tell it to people. I've got a barn owl. In the end, you will find it, of course, because you're going to look for it. Hey, there must be one. Then you find it.
I would like to add something.
Sure.
I think the personal experience of people, that's something that intelligent artificial can never duplicate. So you can watch a documentary, you can watch many books, but the morning that you go in winter in a grassland, you are frozen, but a group of cranes flying over you, crawling, that moment you never forget. So the technology can improve wherever it was or wherever it wants, but it never is going to change the way that people enjoy nature and birds. And you enjoy nature and birds just with the binoculars. Listen a blue rock thrush in the middle of Barcelona, walking to here, you know. So I think it's something that you have to connect with people, and this is something that for sure technology never is going to change.
Thank you very much. More. We're a bit short on time, but yeah.
Jo, dic jo.
Sí. Bueno, si pots...
Vinc aquí.
Ok.
No puc aixecar, no?
All right.
Sorry, I don't know if I will be able to explain it, but just a comment. I feel a little bit confused because 50 years ago it was quite difficult and dangerous to go out in the field work because of the hunting pressure in some places in Spain, because it was crowded of hunters. Now, luckily, the situation has improved a lot. Today we're still with problems, but I think that the situation has improved. And if you are outside in the field now, Sunday morning, for example, there are a lot of people walking, running, they're watching also. And here, was in our the ECO entity, we have an increasing number of people involved in ornithology or in nature. But in a recent study published during this month in a European journal, comparing more than 30 countries of Europe or more of the world, Spain was in the last position of measuring the connection of people with nature. So I think it's interesting. There is not a balance. I feel confused because what did happen? We have more people interested in birds, but otherwise there are people that doing sport, but very far away from the really nature and the things of the nature.
Just to say that I also read the headline, and I was surprised. I think we need to read into the study and the methodology and how they because it's it's weird, unexpected. Yeah, but maybe.
Or we can very simply comment that we have more and more people in nature, more and more ornithologists, but still it is not enough.
Yeah, well, exactly. Still not enough, yes. There's one more, yeah.
Thank you for your funny reflections. If we are talking about future, I think we need taking into account young people. What do you think about the decreasing of the number of young people interested in all Europe in studies of science?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this statistic. Can you say any more about it?
The studies of science are not selected for the young people in the last years. Young people seems not be interested in these studies, even ornithology.
You mean at university? It's not a common choice
Yes.
as a
Yes.
university.
Yeah, maybe if I can start to give an answer, I guess it will not be the final answer. Mentioning universities, that's in fact a good point. I mean, we see somehow, on the one hand, a little bit a decrease over the last 50 years, if you come back to the initial question, in terms of ornithological studies. I mean, you cannot go studying ornithology so easily anymore nowadays. So that's something that has changed at universities. They do something else now, the students, which is also certainly very interesting and important. But having this focus on organismal biology, I think that has shifted a little bit away at the universities at least. But I think we have to start earlier. We really have to start making people aware of the fascination of nature, and you have to do that with kids. You have to make environmental education at the right age and in as much as you can possibly do, because then these people will eventually perhaps become a little bit more often also scientists or citizen scientists or whatever, working with nature together. I think we really have to change the way education is, not to change it, but to include things in education that are more directly related to the value of nature at a very early age.
Yeah, I totally agree. Plant the seed at primary school. They should all go out. But they even have the pressure that there are so many things they need to learn. There's no room anymore. There's no space for having them out in the field or going to watch for the amphibians in early spring. Even these simple things that we all used to do, they need to do other things. They need to learn English when they are 8. Yeah, they didn't do that in my time. But yeah, so there's a serious problem that there's so many things they need to know, and we need to make sure that nature and experiencing nature and learning about nature is one of them at very early age. Because I totally agree that then they are open to these, then they have the mindset, that attracts them to nature.
In this regard, maybe we need to stress bring birds to the school with kids. Now we are trying. From the ICO we are trying to bring garden birds project to the schools, and I think this is a very good way to let the kids know about birds.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them will be interested in the future.
Yeah, BirdLife the Netherlands does the same with the urban bird count. They do their schools together with the teacher, and I think that's helpful.
Good. I think we're over time. I think we can leave it here. We can continue tonight, maybe with beers, and certainly tomorrow. Thank you all very much for your participation, your ideas, your thoughts. I think there are some small presents ready. They're coming. Yeah, from President of ICO, Jordi. Nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.